Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm here today with John Jeffcock, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Winmark. And I'm going to let John tell us about how he explains what Winmark is. John, welcome to the show.
Great to be here with you today, Will.
So John, why don't you give a quick overview for our listeners of how you describe Winmark?
Okay, how to start? We run a portfolio of C-suite networks. We run everything from CEOs to CFOs, CHROs, CIOs, etc. I think we run about 14, 16 of them. I operate in about 14, 16 cities. So we do that, and the way we see as CXO, you're a chief something officer. So the X is your sort of technical background, and we don't really do that. We expect the lawyers to know the law, the finance directors to know how to do accounts and that kind of thing. We focus more on the C and the O, and for us, the C is focusing on running the departmental function, and the O is about adding value across the organisation. So we focus on really management and leadership and how that piece works. And we organise ourselves by functional groups, but we also see, because we find most of our, if you take the C-suite, most I think there are about 45 C-suite roles. If you take D, there's digital, data, diversity, for etc. So there are about 45 of them. Only 5 staff officers sit on the exec team, so they've got about 9 each reporting to them. So we see everyone as being a chief multidisciplinary officer, really. And so we plug them into their own network, but we also plug them into the C-suite generally, and we have an open platform so the CFOs can see what the CMOs are doing and the CHROs can see what the CIO is doing. So it's an open platform where people can communicate and share ideas. And I guess our role is to challenge and aspire and help people look at things in new ways, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And to share sort of practical insights, yeah, that kind of thing.
So you conduct some research, but the primary thing you do is you run these, I don't know if I'd call them networking groups or groups where say a chief legal officer or chief marketing officer can connect with peers and have discussions. So tell me about, for one of those groups, is it mostly going to talks that's one to many, or is it more about creating opportunities for members to connect with one another? If I'm a member, what am I experiencing as part of Winmark?
Yeah, okay. So we are really a knowledge and connections business. And so if you give you on the connection side is a really good example. So we had a telco recently join in Europe, and they operate in 9 cities. And so what we did with them is she joined. She had an issue. She had 3 issues. One was she was managing the Indian office, and she was having problems with that culturally. And so we introduced her to 2 non-execs who sit on the boards of Indian companies as a way of helping her facilitate that process. She was responsible for LGBTQ+ across the organisation. So and she wanted to run separate programs in all those cities, but some of them weren't big enough to justify that. So we introduced her to the heads of diversity at Capital One and HSBC. And she's now running joint programs with them in a couple of cities. And one of the other issues was competency framework. She was interested in really looking at how her skills based on the function was. And so she said, which was very interested in doing that. Do we have any members who got examples? So we said an example from Vodafone, which is big FTSE 100, telco company in the UK. So when this one joins, we try and add some immediate value like that. And then really we have this meeting program, and we're very aware we can't compete with the IBMs and Deloittes and all the world. So where they go in depth, we go in breadth, which is quite unique. So we look at how you interface with other parts of the company, how you and where you can add value, and how that whole piece at the C-suite level should work. And we run a lot of meetings. So our aim is to get the people to actually tell their stories. So it's very much a case study driven exercise. And nice of that. So the last one I went to was on tech governance. We had Volvo Financial Services, who are actually a bank, not a car company, and they're based in Delaware. And so we had the lead from Delaware talking there. And then we've been chaired by a former CEO of Barclays, who's actually in Kenya. And then we had a satellite company, actually a UK company, but the guy was based in France, all sharing on how they did that sort of thing. So it's become a sort of a global sharing forum of how to address management issues. And I guess if you're if you're a good consultancy, you love what we do, because in a way we prepare the buyers to approach it in a more intelligent way, because they've got through their heads what they're trying to achieve and how they think that it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Pre-COVID, were you primarily doing in-person events, or have you been doing kind of virtual online events for a long time as well?
Good point. So most of our members are 40 plus in age. I probably shouldn't say that, but they are. And most of them
nothing wrong with that age group. I'm well into that age group, and there's nothing wrong with saying that.
Likewise, and I think most of them had never experienced Zoom or Team before, to be quite honest. So yes, we were initially in London and Manchester, and we had a fledgling businesses in Amsterdam and Dublin. But in a way, COVID-19 was quite brutal to us in one way, because we definitely lost members through it. But at the same time, it enabled us to globalize what we do very quickly, and so we've really gone from, in a year we've changed enormously, and we've really moved from being a face-to-face thing to a global sort of C-suite platform, and it is quite fun the way you can hop around and that kind of thing. You can look at what different countries are doing, different aspects on it. So it's worked well. The other thing I didn't expect is, because we're not face to face, the people who couldn't make stuff physically are now turning up. And so we might have people who was just a 100-mile journey, and because they now can attend, and that included and that had a big impact on diversity. So the school run was less of an issue, if that makes sense. That's like a weird thing to say, but it's actually, it improved the diversity of the attendance as well. And also, we used to do stuff all our stuff was in very smart boardrooms, it was in Bank of America and all these really posh places, and I think some people just didn't really feel that they naturally fitted into that space. And I think what was quite interesting is that for a new group of people were more open to being involved, and that new group is the future. So that was really important to us.
Okay. So the benefits that members receive from signing up would be connections with other peers in a sort of curated environment, as well as being able to access. So they get curated connections, so they can come to you or come to your team and get like a sort of curated introduction, like, oh, talk to the head of diversity at Barclays or something. But then they can also make these more serendipitous connections at your events with sort of peers from other companies and sharing lessons learned.
Precisely, yeah. And we have a content program behind that. So we generate content, and so we try and map all the C-suite functions and look at how they interface. That makes sense. So we have our tax director group complains about our HR group because they don't understand the tax implications of global mobility, for example. So we try and smooth out all those joints as well. So it's quite a fun. I think a lot of them become friends eventually. And interesting enough, I had an email this morning from a ex McKinsey's guy who's member of our non-exec group who works for a Jewish charity, and he was looking for a fellow trustee, and he met someone who was in a non-exec group 5 years ago, and he asked them for their name. So it's all sorts of sort of semi-social things happen as well within it.
What have you learned during COVID about how to make a virtual event successful? One of the things that I've seen is that it's fantastic to your point about making it more accessible to a lot of people, because you don't have to drive for an hour and park and go inside and wait around and start and then drive home. So what would have been a 3-hour commitment becomes just a 45-minute commitment. But on the other hand, I found that it's very difficult with Zoom or to allow those sort of serendipitous one-on-one connections and that kind of informal networking, cocktail hour type stuff. And since that's such a big part of your value proposition, how have you kind of enabled that for your members?
Yeah, it's not. It's a very good question. We've done a couple of things actually. One of which is we've asked. Normally we have people presenting case studies and doing it in a very sort of matter of fact way. That makes sense. We're now asking people to also talk talk about how was their emotional journey in that, and so we're trying to make the speakers more personal, if that makes sense, and that's one of the impacts. So that changes the conversation. We also brief the chairs to very much bring the people on the Zoom call into the conversation. So rather than hiding behind the sort of chat column, if that makes sense, they're sort of brought into the group. So we do that. We do put them into small rooms. And that helps a lot. So putting these rooms of sort of four or five, when they introduce each other, they get to meet each other. I think that works well. And the other thing we do at the end of every meeting now, we have not a cool down period, but we have a sort of period of about 15 minutes where we say the meeting is now formally closed, but we've now got the coffee rooms open. So if you want to hang around, you're very welcome to chat and ask anybody here any question, or answering any question, or just share thoughts. So it's been those really.
What are some of the big trends that you've seen? Maybe you could pick any of the different C-suite groups. I'd be curious, kind of what are some of the big topics of discussion lately?
There are so many at the moment. It's almost a sort of where to start.
Well, I have one. Maybe I'll start with one. I've seen a lot of interest of companies now trying to figure out the future of work, as it was sort of the work from home was imposed upon companies, but now, when at least the return to work or return to the office is now at least maybe not immediate, but in sight, companies are trying to figure out, do we require everybody to come back to work just like before, or is it hybrid, or do they do what they want, or do we recruit talent from anywhere in the world now and they can work from home? And so I'm seeing a lot of companies struggle with that discussion. I'm curious what you've seen.
Yeah, it's not resolved yet. I think we're starting to get so I was, prior to all this, I was quite a sort of come to work person, in that sense. I never worked from home in my life, so I'm a bad, but now I'm a complete convert, because also you get so much done, even if not having that journey to work piece, you get so much more done. What we're generally picking up is people are setting a philosophy first and then a policy, if that makes sense. So they're trying to sit back and saying, right, what are we fundamentally trying to achieve here? And then the policy should fall out of that. They're also doing trial periods. And it depends a lot on what you do as an organization. It's very easy to work from home if you're a law firm. It's very hard if you're Pret, for example, or a sandwich shop. So it does impact, a huge impact on obviously what you do. And there's a divide there. You can get, certainly if you've got a manufacturing organization or something which is consumer facing, you get the office lot can all work from home, but we can't. That's not so. You've got to manage this thing quite carefully. We certainly, since lockdown, have recruited people I've never met. I'm the CEO, face to face. What we generally pick up is people are going to do a trial period about 3 months, and we generally pick up people are looking at 2-3 days a week. My concern, because actually, oddly enough, we had an exec team meeting about this week, is I don't want to create silos in the company. And what you can do, if it's the teams meeting as teams, then they don't have that cross bit with the other teams. That makes sense. And so I'm a little bit concerned that might more silo the company. That makes sense. So that could happen. But generally speaking, I think we're looking at most service organizations are looking at 2-3 days a week in the office. On the flip side, that is very different in different countries. So we know in Hong Kong, most of the offices are large in people's flats, and so people want to go to the office, and also it has it's your free space. It is in your office and not at your home. So you have cultural and different city impacts. I also think there's, as everyone's identifying, is there's a huge age thing going on here as well. If you're sharing a flat, if you're 24, 25 kind of thing, it's a very different world to being married and with kids in a house somewhere kind of thing. So the younger groups are changing. Certainly what we've done in the office is we collapsed a third of our desking, and we've turned it into sort of a WeWork area. Not beanbags yet, sofas, but sort of on that sort of journey. And so it's more a hub and place to meet than it is to a formal office in that sense. But I think the whole has changed, and I think in quite a positive way.
Yeah. You preside over a group that is really all about building connections. What are some of the tips that you have for executives on how to use a group like yours effectively. So how do you make effective connections and get the most out of something like that?
Yeah, really good point. The way we recommend it to members is you need to start to think about what you're trying to achieve fundamentally. So what are you trying to achieve as an individual and as a team and an organization? And then when you do that, there are things that fall out of that. There are things like I need to know this, or I need to be connected to these types of people. So it is definitely worth doing. And it was quite interesting. We had a very large, actually it was another telco company by coincidence who joined, and the group lead thought this will be great for my team, but it won't really impact me. And I remember the first meeting he came to, he met a representative from a UAE sovereign wealth fund, who actually said, "Is your company for sale?" We're $1 billion+ company, and I've never been asked. I've never brought a lead into the company before in my role, so I went straight back into CEO. Says, "Come, what's the buyer?" So my CEO went, "Wow, how do you were you in touch with them?" So, and then he was invited by the Belgian embassy to another meeting. So it's not always what you expect, and I think people join and stay for different reasons. They join for quite different reasons, and sometimes what they get out of it is quite unique. We had a really good one. We had in our CEO group, we had a CEO talking about opening an office in Shanghai and what you do and the challenges and all that kind of stuff. And then we had another guy who said, he came out of the meeting and said, "Well, if that guy can open Shanghai, I can do this. It's really easy." So it does give confidence as well. That makes sense. The same system, so it does work. Yeah. Sorry.
And to what degree how do you navigate? I suppose it might be a somewhat sensitive area, is that I would assume that people's employers are typically paying for their membership fees, right? Because they're expecting that the person is getting value for the company, right? There's also some possibility that in an organization like this, you might be, using it to find people to bring into your company. So if you're short a chief marketing officer, you might be, looking around the chief marketing officer group to hire someone, or some people might also be kind of looking at it for a new job at the same time they're participating. How do you kind of navigate that whole terrain?
Yeah, it's a good one. So the membership, as you rightly say, is owned by the corporate, not the individual. So the individual moves on, the membership remains with the corporate, if that makes sense. But we have a look after the package for in-betweeners, which is a sort of separate question. The question is, we definitely get members who are, so if you go to the big audit firms like KPMG and Deloitte and PwC, their partner exit program is about 5 years. So you get people coming in to the group who are starting to consider what they're going to do next. So I got the COO of a large US financial institution who's been in there for sort of 15, 16 years and is starting to think about, what do I do next? But it's not an urgent thing. It's about three years. So we do a few search introductions to people like that and that kind of thing. But I haven't. So I had a concern exactly like that. I thought as a corporate, if he had a search company as a partner for it, like a Egan Zehnder or Korn Ferry kind of or Heidrick's kind of character, would they use it to poach people out? And that's not at all what they use. And the companies are quite mature about it. On the whole, they turn around and say that if the guy or girl was going to leave, that they were probably going to leave anyway. Mm-hmm. And so it's you can only encourage someone a certain amount. So they don't really feel threatened by it from that perspective. Have people poached out of it? Certainly, we had a digital guy once speak, and I think 4 people offered him a job after he spoke. So we've definitely had that go on, but and definitely introductions made. But it's been more execs to non-exec roles, if that makes sense, and more people saying, "Can I have a conversation with you because we need someone like you?" And the assumption is it might be them or someone else. And so my guess is, we've been around for 25 years as of 1st of April. So I'm sure we'd have had some people poached within the group. But if I look back, no one comes to mind. So I'm sure it will have happened, but we don't consciously see it.
Talk to me about your plans and aspirations for growth of Winmark. It seems you're mostly focused on the UK right now. Are you looking to grow geographically, or to maybe grow vertically by adding other roles, or how do you think about continuing to accomplish your mission?
Okay, so we run say 16 networks, and so I guess those will slowly increase over time to around sort of 24-ish, if that makes sense. At the moment we operate in 14 cities. That includes Atlanta and Las Vegas, bizarrely enough, and then we have Budapest, Vienna, Madrid, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Mumbai, Dubai. So I can't remember the others as well. So we're operating about 40 cities total. So our aim is to open up in the top 200 cities in the world. Most of our members are multinationals, so they operate internationally anyway. And I remember the chairman of a very large group turning around to me once and saying, "I love what you do. I think it's really interesting, but I'm not interested in talking to you until you're open in these 3 countries." So we are creating that global footprint. And that, so I was emailing with Lagos in Nigeria this morning. And I gave a talk remotely to Warsaw in Poland. So at 9 o'clock. So it is becoming truly international. And actually, to be honest, I've been running companies for 20 years. And after you've done something 20 years, you kind of know how to do it with your eyes closed. That makes sense. And actually, it makes my job more fun. I get to meet a lot of really interesting people all over the world. Our guy in Atlanta is a guy called Nate, who's a professor of operations management at Georgia State University. He's really, really good. He's written 2 books on how to be a COO. I think he's the only person in the world who's written 2 books on how to be a COO. And he chairs our COO group over there. And he's really good. So we get some really interesting, and he has that brilliant American way of making everyone feel confident. There's a knack you guys have, which I aspire to be like.
Well, wow, amazing! I didn't realize that you're so international. That's incredible. What's kind of the recruiting process like? How do you go and approach new companies and explain the value proposition?
Yeah, our issue in new cities is we don't know who's good and who's bad. A lot of people, what you'll find in cities, a lot of people work for each other historically, and you've got some very liked people and you've got some very unliked people. That makes sense. And what we're very nervous about is hitting an unliked person. Like, essentially, you point an unliked person to be chair somewhere, and you can get in all sorts of trouble. So the Foreign Office have a rule that you always have 3 reference points. So we have a minimum of three reference points. So what we do is, if let's say we're planning to open in our CFO group in New York, for example, we will find say 5 CFOs in New York. We'll ask them who they recommend as a search company, executive search company. So we then, we then go to the executive search company and ask them who they'd recommend are the best CFOs in the area. And what we're doing that, which is quite interesting, is we're checking which such companies are good, and that's really useful to us as we know who to ally with, because our first meetings need to be populated, so we can't have to gang out with the search company to help us do that. And also the search companies have usually been around for a long time, and they have a very clear market of who's good and who's bad and who to watch. The dilemma we often have, which we had in Tel Aviv, for example, was, do you want to go for someone ending their career who everybody knows and everyone and knows everybody, or do you want to go for the leading edge of the next generation? So then we had that in Tel Aviv. We had a older guy and a younger woman. I mean, we decided in that case to go with the young woman. But it's catch, because you also want someone who's known, because in a way that gives you confidence in the city. And we're also very, very keen to have ethnically local people. So in Mumbai, it's an Indian person, not an American in Mumbai. That makes sense. And we're very keen to have that, because we're very keen to have that. I think it gives it a different element.
Absolutely. Yeah. How do you decide on the topics for all the content? And I think I saw somewhere on your site, you produce some incredible number of hours of content every year. I think it was like 10,000 hours of content per year, or some very large number. How do you decide, what the content is? It by just intuition, or do you survey members of what they want to talk about, or what? Talk to me about the content program.
So what we do, what I've generally found in life is, if you have 100 members, you'll have a smaller group of say 5 to 10 who really are the sort of thought leaders in the group, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get those people together and turn them into an advisory panel
Mm-hmm.
for the network, and then we survey the whole network and we ask them what their upcoming issues are and opportunities and challenges and all that kind of stuff. They tell us, and then we build a draft program for the year, and then we take that to that smaller group and say, this is what members said, this is what we built, what do you think? And they quite turn around and say, you know, and what we'll do is we'll go to them with a long list, sense, and we'll immediately at the very earliest part of the meeting, we will agree what's definitely in and what's definitely out, if that makes sense. So typically it's a bottom 4 on top 3 or 4 kind of thing. And then we debate the others, and quite often the angles of those might change, because you might have someone saying, this is an issue for me, and you might have one more senior people go, they should know that already. and that's not of interest to the rest of us. and I remember we had a lovely one of that with GE talking to one of our members in the CEO group, and it was in, I think, about 2010, and one of our CEOs asked a question, and GE said, yeah, I think we dealt with that in 1984. They dealt with it 40 years ago. And you do have that. You get some companies like GE who are managerially very advanced, and actually we need to have the GEs and the Googles in the organization, because they will be managerially much more sophisticated than the other groups. So we do make a point bringing those groups. So really the agenda is membership led. We do occasionally, we have no political agenda, but we will occasionally run themes across the networks. An obvious one we were running prior to Black Lives Matter was obviously around diversity. We've done a lot on mental health recently and remote team, that kind of thing. So we will run stuff across the group, but it's not with a political agenda of any kind.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. And I imagine that you are aware of lots of opportunities of what companies are struggling with. There could be a world in which you would help connect your members to the right accounting firm or consulting firm or legal firm or PR firm or marketing firm. Do you get into that of making introductions to professional services firms, or have you decided just to kind of stay clear of that?
Yeah, we have what we call technical partners to some of our networks. So, for example, in our HR director group or CHRO group, we will have an employment law firm, because it's very important when the HR directors are saying something, they might default to the lawyer saying, "You're the lawyer. Is this okay to do it this way?" So we call them technical partners. We work. I think we've got 40, 50 partners we work with. So quite a lot of very well established big and small professional services as well, because what we're after is we call them technical partners, because it's not a sponsorship deal. It's more, what value do you bring to the table, and if you can't answer the question or bring value to the room, you're not really welcome as such. So we do work with them. We do refer. Members do a lot of referrals. So I was talking to the chair of our Chief Sustainability Officer Network in Hong Kong yesterday, who works for A.S. Watson, and so if someone was moving to Hong Kong and wanted to know which audit firm to use or which law firm to use to help them set up, we would typically refer them to that individual to recommend someone locally, and we find that peer-to-peer recommendation is quite powerful. We do a lot. The other thing we do is we have a lot of members who obviously get made redundant or change role, or there's a restructure, or they get acquired, that kind of thing. So a lot of members fall out of roles. So we maintain an exec search list. So if you're part of our finance director group and you come in a role, we'll have a list of the top sort of finance partners of search companies, which will just email you, so you can connect with them very quickly. So we maintain a few lists to maintain them. We used to have a consultancy list, but it's very hard to maintain quality within that group. So we ended up having a long list, because a lot of our members
you tell me.
A lot of members became consultants, and as you can imagine, they've been a group CFO or HR director, they joined consultancies.
Yeah.
And they said, can we sell that to members? And we ended up creating this list. And then I remember a really interesting point. We had a very senior former CEO of a global partnership turned around and said, well, now this person's on the list, I don't really want to be on it. I don't want to be on it anymore. And that was for us a wake up call. It was almost impossible. We couldn't say no to people joining the list, if that makes sense, because they would get grumpy with us. And we also it was quite hard to judge quality in the group. So we ended up just cancelling the list. So we have our networks have informal relationships, and they have formal relationships. Our chief procurement officer network is just partnering with the US tech company, for example. Mm-hmm. So that's a formal relationship where we properly embed them into the group. We also bring people in for specific things, and that's quite interesting. That I think it's quite, people at this level are quite mature in their careers and as human beings. And what we tend to find, I remember we had a big audit firm partnering our non-exec group because of the audit opportunity, obviously, and we found out that the top person in the world at doing a certain thing was actually sat in KPMG, who were a competitor. Which is something. And so our members said we'd like to hear from the person at KPMG, not at the partner. I went, okay, I'll run that past them. and I did, and they went, you know what, your members are entirely right. The best person in the world at doing this is the guy at KPMG, and we're very happy to speak because we'll learn from him as well. So there is a maturity within the group, if that makes sense. They don't really see themselves as competing. They're at the sort of top of their careers in many ways. So they're quite happy to be shared and a bit more relaxed in that way.
Yeah, I love that story of that's what a great story. It's sort of the sense of collegiality among true professionals that aren't embarrassed to have someone else come in, and talk. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. So John, if people wanted to learn more about Winmark, where would you point them?
Obviously, we have a website. There is an American company called Winmark as well, so, which is a franchising business. So we are winmarkglobal.com. You can go to that, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Jeffcock is quite an unusual name. I get called Jeff every other day. so I think I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn, and ping me an email. I'm always happy to chat.
Great. Well, I'll include those links in the show notes. John, thanks so much for coming to the show. This was really interesting hearing about the network that you've built.
Okay. Thanks, Will.